Dear viewers, prepare yourselves for an enthralling journey into the world of mystery and deception. You are about to experience a gripping tale crafted by a Dr. Rami and narrated exclusively for the devoted followers of the Paul Durius Case channel. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more thrilling narratives. The Enigma of the Vanishing Tenant was first published in a time when the world was still reeling from the aftershocks of global conflict. It was an era where whispers of espionage, cryptic messages, and covert affairs filled the air, feeding into the public's collective paranoia. The intricate web of deception that shrouded society inspired countless tales of intrigue, none more captivating than this. Disguises, hidden agendas, and the fear of the unknown played a pivotal role in shaping stories that left readers on edge, eager to unravel the truth. Tonight we delve into a peculiar and baffling case, one that defied logic and challenged even the keenest minds. Unlike previous investigations where the crime itself was the focal point, this case began with an insignificant, almost laughable event, something that most would have dismissed as mere coincidence. But in the world of shadows and secrets, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. A single, seemingly trivial anomaly unraveled into a grand conspiracy, leading to revelations that shook even the most seasoned investigators. It all started on an ordinary evening, as I found myself in the company of an old friend, Jonathan Harrington, a man with an insatiable curiosity for all things peculiar. The conversation drifted, as it always did in his presence, to the subject of strange occurrences in the city, disappearances, unsolved mysteries, and uncanny coincidences. But among the countless tales we exchanged that night, one stood out: the inexplicable case of an apartment that had been rented at an impossibly low price. The tenants, an unassuming young couple, the Daltons, who had moved in only a week ago. The mystery: they had vanished without a trace overnight. No forwarding address, no signs of departure, just an eerily empty flat that seemed untouched, as if they had never been there at all. What followed was a trail of deception, a game of shadows, and a truth so unnerving that even the most rational minds struggled to comprehend it. Stay with us as we uncover the chilling mystery of the Enigma of the Vanishing Tenant, a story of secrets hidden in plain sight, of identities that shift like mirages, and a revelation that will leave you questioning everything you think you know. We've finally found a place at last. Claire beamed, her voice filled with excitement, and something else, an unplaceable unease. A beautiful flat in Ashworth Court. Jonathan raised an eyebrow, swirling the brandy in his glass. Ashworth Court, that grand place off Kensington. Thought those flats cost a fortune. Exactly. Claire leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. But we got it for a mere £75 a year. Silence settled over the room, the weight of it pressing against the flickering candlelight. Jonathan scoffed. 75? Impossible. There must be a catch. A massive deposit, I assume. No deposit, no hidden fees, Claire replied, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her glass. We just had to purchase the furniture for £40, and it's all exquisite, antique pieces, the kind you'd expect in a collector's estate. At this, Jonathan let out a low whistle. Either the previous tenants were fools, or there's something terribly wrong with that place. Claire hesitated. That's what unsettles me. It was all too easy. No long waiting lists, no competing offers, just a desperate landlord eager to sign us in. And then there's the feeling. Jonathan leaned in, intrigued. Feeling. A shadow crossed Claire's face. The moment we stepped in, it was as if we weren't alone, not in a ghostly way, but like the walls were watching, the silence too deliberate. And the strangest thing, the landlady insisted we move in immediately, almost as if she couldn't wait to be rid of it. Jonathan exchanged glances with the others in the room. Sounds like a case for our dear friend, doesn't it? Indeed, murmured a voice from the corner. The detective, silent until now, set down his glass with a knowing smile. Let's just say, bargains like these often come at a greater price than money. It was sheer chance, really, Claire began, her fingers tapping absently against the edge of her glass. We hadn't even considered Wentworth and Hale, too high-end, too exclusive. Their listings were always for sprawling penthouses, or grand old Mayfair townhouses, the kind only the elite could afford. But we thought, What harm could it do to check? We were ready to leave when the agent, rather offhandedly, mentioned a flat, £75 a year, dirt cheap, but of course, there was a catch. Jonathan leaned in, intrigued. There's always a catch. Claire nodded. The agent seemed almost dismissive about it, saying it had been on their books for months, they'd sent countless clients to view it, yet somehow, no one ever took it. It's most certainly gone by now, he said, but people never bother to inform us, and we keep sending more. He laughed, as if it was all some tiresome inconvenience, but something about the way he said it, like he didn't believe his own words, made my stomach twist. Still, we took an order to view it, just in case. You never know, right? She glanced around the dimly lit room, letting the tension settle before continuing. We went there immediately, straight into a cab, no hesitation. Number 16, second floor. As we stepped out, we noticed how quiet the building was, not the usual bustling of neighbors, no muffled conversations behind doors, just an eerie, suffocating silence. And then, as we waited for the lift, a woman walked past, elegant, well-dressed, but pale as if she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to. She glanced at us, her eyes flickering with something, recognition perhaps, before she hurried away, without a word. Jonathan frowned, and inside, Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. The moment we stepped into the flat, I knew something was wrong. The detective, silent until now, finally spoke. You were right, because places like that, they don't stay empty without a reason. It felt like fate, really, Claire said, her voice measured, careful. We had almost given up. The search for a flat had turned into a war, one where the desperate and the determined had to fight tooth and nail, just to secure a place to live. And then, as if by some strange twist of luck, we found it. A listing so absurdly cheap, it didn't make sense. Jonathan smirked, swirling the liquid in his glass. It never does. The best bargains always come with something unseen. Claire nodded. Exactly. As we arrived, we bumped into a friend of mine, Alice Whitaker. She and her husband had been searching as well, and the moment she saw us, she shook her head. It's no use, Claire, she said breathlessly, descending the staircase, as if she was in a hurry to leave. It's gone. Someone's taken it already. That should have been the end of it, Claire continued, frowning. But John said we should at least check. After all, what if we offered a bit more, a premium to sweeten the deal? A dreadful thing to do, I know, but you understand how ruthless flat hunting can be. The competition, it changes people. Jonathan chuckled darkly. Survival of the fittest, or should I say, the wealthiest. Claire exhaled. That's what we thought. But then we got upstairs. The strangest thing, the flat wasn't taken at all. The maid let us in without hesitation, as if she'd been expecting us. The rooms were pristine, untouched, as though no one had ever lived there at all. And then, we met the woman who owned it, Mrs. Linden. She was polite, almost overly so, but there was something off. Her smile was too tight. Her eyes darted to the door too often, like she was listening for something, or someone. She paused, her fingers tightening around her glass. Then came the final surprise. Immediate possession, she said, with an almost relieved breath. And the furniture, just £50. I only ask that you move in right away. The silence in the room thickened. Jonathan leaned in, his voice low. And did you? Claire hesitated. We did, but I can't shake the feeling that we weren't the first ones to make such an easy deal, and that maybe, just maybe, the last tenants never truly left. The detective, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. You were right to be suspicious, because in cases like these, Claire, the real price isn't paid in money. The next morning, as the final signatures dried on the contract, Claire felt an odd sense of satisfaction mixed with unease. By tomorrow, she and John would be moving into their new home. A deal too good to refuse, yet something about it nagged at her. It's all rather amusing, don't you think? She said lightly over breakfast with Jonathan, a family friend. I mean, the way Alice was so certain the flat was already taken. She seemed almost relieved when she thought we wouldn't get it. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. And yet, it was waiting for you. Strange. I asked Poirot about it, Claire admitted with a nervous chuckle. Not that he seemed particularly interested. He asked a few questions about the rent, what flats in the area usually go for, then he simply nodded, said it was a curious case, and took his leave for a walk. A walk? Jonathan smirked. Our great detective, wasting a morning on a stroll. Claire sipped her tea, the porcelain trembling slightly against her lips. When he returned, something was different. His eyes were sharp, excited even. He placed his cane on the table, smoothed his hat with that usual precise care of his, and then he looked at me. What did he say? Claire swallowed. Just one thing. Madame, I strongly suggest you do not move in tomorrow. A heavy silence settled between them. Jonathan leaned forward. And are you going to listen to him? Claire hesitated. The papers were signed. The deal was done. But deep inside, she knew Poirot never gave warnings lightly. Something was waiting in that flat, something that didn't want them there. As Poirot leaned forward, his sharp eyes gleamed with an unsettling certainty. It is most fortunate, mon ami, that we have no pressing cases at hand. We may dedicate ourselves entirely to this most curious affair. Hastings frowned. Affair? You mean the Robinsons' flat? Poirot, surely you're not serious. Mais oui, I am most serious. Poirot tapped his fingertips together, his expression thoughtful yet intent. Consider, my friend, the actual rent for the flats in Montague Mansions is £350 per annum, and yet this particular flat, it is being let for only £80. A miracle, you say? Non, Hastings. A trick, a deception. Hastings felt a slight chill creep over him. You think there's something wrong with it? Perhaps it's haunted, as Mrs. Robinson suggested. Poirot exhaled sharply, shaking his head. A ghost is not what concerns me. But tell me this, why did Mrs. Robinson's friend insist the flat was already let? Why was she so certain? He leaned in, voice dropping to a near whisper, and yet when Mrs. Robinson arrived, the flat was waiting for her, almost as if it had been meant for her all along. A thick silence filled the air, pressing against Hastings like a weight. Poirot stood abruptly, smoothing his cuffs with meticulous care. There is something hidden within those walls, mon ami, something someone wants concealed at all costs, and we must uncover it before it is too late. For the first time since hearing of the miraculous deal, Hastings felt an unmistakable sense of dread. What exactly had the Robinsons walked into, and more importantly, who was waiting for them behind that locked door? Poirot sat back, steepling his fingers, his gaze sharp and unreadable. Tell me, Hastings, do you not find it strange that despite its absurdly low price, no one has taken that flat? Hastings frowned. But surely, Poirot, the explanation is obvious. The other woman, the one who claimed the flat was already let, must have simply gone to the wrong apartment. It's the only logical answer. Poirot tilted his head, considering. Perhaps. But logic, mon ami, is a delicate thing. It bends, twists, and at times deceives. Regardless, the fact remains. Many others have been sent to see this flat. Many have walked through its doors, and yet when Mrs. Robinson arrived, it was still waiting. He paused, his voice dropping slightly. That suggests there is something very wrong about it. Hastings hesitated. He hadn't thought about it that way. Well, Mrs. Robinson didn't seem to notice anything amiss. Indeed, and that, mon ami, is precisely what troubles me. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Tell me, did she strike you as a truthful woman? Hastings flushed slightly. She was, well, charming. Quite delightful, really. Poirot sighed, shaking his head. Ah, Hastings, you let beauty cloud your reason. Describe her to me. She's tall and fair, Hastings began. Her hair, oh, it's a truly remarkable shade of auburn. Poirot smirked. Always you have had a weakness for auburn hair, he murmured. Continue. Blue eyes, a flawless complexion, Hastings added, then faltered. And well, that's all really. And her husband? Poirot prompted. Hastings shrugged. Oh, an ordinary sort of chap, not particularly tall or short, dark or fair, just average, just so. Poirot nodded. There are hundreds of men like that, faces that blend into a crowd, unremarkable and forgettable. He leaned forward slightly. And yet tell me, Hastings, What do you know of them? Truly, Hastings hesitated. Well, Parker introduced us, but they're recent acquaintances really. I don't know much about them. Poirot's expression grew thoughtful, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. That, my friend, is what unsettles me most. A flat no one will take, a husband and wife appearing out of nowhere, and a mystery wrapped so neatly in coincidence, it is almost as if someone meant for us to overlook it. A slow chill crept up Hastings' spine. Something was very wrong, and he suspected they were only just beginning to uncover it. Hastings frowned. I believe you, Poirot, but surely you don't think. Poirot raised a hand, silencing him with a small deliberate gesture. Mon ami, have I said that I think anything? Non. I only say this, it is a curious story, and there is nothing, absolutely nothing to explain it. He paused, his eyes glinting. Except, perhaps, the lady's name. Hastings shifted uneasily. Her name is Stella, he said stiffly, but I don't see. Poirot let out a tremendous chuckle, shaking his head in amusement. Ah, Monsieur Hastings, Stella means a star, does it not? And what do stars do? Hastings blinked. They shine. Precisely, they give light. Poirot's expression was triumphant. And light, my friend, is what we seek. Poirot, you're being ridiculous, Hastings muttered. Am I? Poirot's voice was suddenly serious. Come, Hastings, we will go to Montague Mansions. It is time to ask questions. Hastings followed him, a growing sense of unease creeping over him. The mansions were an imposing block of buildings, their white stone facades gleaming in the afternoon sun. Everything about them spoke of quiet luxury, of a place where secrets could be easily hidden behind expensive doors. A uniformed porter lounged on the threshold, his cap tilted slightly as he basked in the warmth. Poirot approached him smoothly, his manner polite but firm. Pardon, monsieur, but could you tell me? Hastings barely heard the words. His eyes were on the building, on the dark windows that seemed to watch them in return. Something wasn't right, and he had the sinking feeling that whatever it was, they were walking straight into it. Poirot's sharp eyes studied the porter as he spoke. A Mr. and Mrs. Robinson reside here. Yes, the man, thick-set and sour-faced, barely looked up from his post. His voice was gruff, indifferent. No. Poirot and Hastings exchanged glances. No, Hastings repeated, frowning. But, second floor surely. The porter exhaled through his nose, clearly uninterested in their confusion. Been here 6 months, if that's what you're asking. Hastings took a step forward, stunned. 6 months. He turned sharply to Poirot, who was watching him with a knowing smirk. That's impossible, he sputtered. There's some mistake. He whirled back to the porter. Are you sure? The lady, she's tall, fair, reddish gold hair. The porter barely hesitated. That's her. Moved in Michaelmas Quarter 6 months ago. With that he gave them no further acknowledgement, and turned away, trudging lazily up the hall, as if dismissing their very presence. Outside, Hastings took in a sharp breath, the cool air doing nothing to quell his growing unease. Poirot, this is absurd. Mrs. Robinson told us she only moved in yesterday. This doesn't make sense. Poirot, ever composed, straightened his cuffs. Ah, Hastings, mon ami, he said lightly, yet with that familiar glint in his eye. Are you still so certain that delightful women always speak the truth? Hastings opened his mouth, then closed it. Poirot chuckled at his silence, and took off down the street, his stride purposeful. Come, we have work to do. Where are we going? Hastings asked, still reeling from the revelation. Poirot turned onto Brompton Road, his expression unreadable. To the house agents, of course. The agents, Poirot nodded. I have a most particular desire, mon cher Hastings, to become a resident of Montague Mansions, and if I am not mistaken, we shall not be bored in the coming days. Hastings barely had time to digest this when, before he knew it, Poirot was speaking to the agent. In mere moments, the detective had secured Number 8 on the 4th floor, a fully furnished flat, at 10 guineas a week. Poirot, Hastings protested, as they stepped out onto the pavement once more. Are you mad, renting a flat, just like that? Poirot waved away his protests, his moustache twitching with satisfaction. But mon ami, why not? I make money nowadays. Hastings sighed, exasperated. You mean you just want to sit in Montague Mansions and wait? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Wait? Non, mon ami. We do not wait. We observe. We listen. We prepare. Hastings shook his head, but the unease inside him had only deepened. Something was wrong with that flat, and if Poirot was right, something or someone was waiting for them in Montague Mansions. Why should I not indulge a whim, mon ami? Poirot asked, his eyes twinkling with a peculiar mischief. Then, as if it were the most casual question in the world, he added, By the way, Hastings, have you a revolver? I straightened, feeling an unexpected thrill. Yes, somewhere, I answered, my voice betraying a mix of excitement and unease. Do you think we'll need it? It is quite possible, he murmured. Then, observing the barely concealed enthusiasm in my expression, he smirked. Ah, I see. The idea pleases you. You always have a taste for the dramatic, the romantic. You imagine shadowy figures, a masked intruder, perhaps even a thrilling chase. I shrugged, but I couldn't deny that the prospect sent a surge of anticipation through me. The following day saw us settled into our temporary home in Montague Mansions. The flat, though modest, was well furnished and comfortable, mirroring the Robinsons' flat exactly in its layout, except that it was 2 floors higher. Poirot seemed more than satisfied, meticulously arranging his belongings while humming a tune under his breath. Sunday arrived, bringing with it an air of expectancy I could not shake. Poirot had spent much of the morning near the window, peering out at the street below with unwavering focus. Then suddenly, as the quiet afternoon stretched on, he snapped upright. Hastings, he whispered urgently, motioning me towards the front door. I followed him quickly, my pulse quickening as a sharp bang echoed from somewhere below. Look over the banisters, Poirot instructed, but do not let yourself be seen. Cautiously, I leaned over the railing, craning my neck to get a clear view. My heart gave a jolt. That's them, I breathed, my voice dropping instinctively to a whisper. The Robinsons. Poirot nodded in satisfaction. Good, now we wait. Half an hour passed in silence. Then, at last, a young woman emerged from the flat below. She was dressed in a garish array of colors, her bold attire a stark contrast to the quiet surroundings. Poirot observed her departure with a thoughtful nod before retreating into our flat, with the air of a man whose suspicions had just been confirmed. And now, mon ami, he said, rubbing his hands together, after the master and mistress, the maid, the flat should be empty. I turned to him, uncertain. And what exactly are we going to do? Poirot had already made his way briskly to the small scullery, where he seized the rope of the coal lift and gave it an experimental tug. We are about to descend, my friend, he announced cheerfully. After the manner of dustbins, I stared at him. What? No one will observe us, he assured me, his tone perfectly confident. It is Sunday afternoon, the perfect time. The English, they enjoy their Sunday concert, their Sunday afternoon stroll, and then of course there is the sacred Sunday nap, after their Sunday roast. Ah, la rôti de veau, it is practically a national ritual. Meanwhile, Hercule Poirot shall conduct his own sacred ritual of investigation. He stepped into the rough wooden contraption and gestured for me to follow. I hesitated, eyeing the coal lift with deep suspicion. The contrivance was no more than a crude open platform operated by pulleys, hardly the most dignified means of entry. Surely you don't mean to say that we're going to Burr Alley Hastings? Time is of the essence. Swallowing my doubts, I climbed in beside him. The lift shuddered under our weight, groaning as Poirot grasped the rope and began lowering us, inch by inch, down the narrow shaft. I gripped the wooden edge tightly, wincing as a cloud of coal dust swirled around us. Are we breaking in? I asked uneasily, keeping my voice low as we descended. Poirot's reply was not particularly reassuring. Not precisely, he said, a sly smile playing at his lips. At least not today. I inhaled sharply, but before I could protest further we reached our destination. The coal lift came to a stop with a faint thud. Poirot moved swiftly, stepping onto the small landing just outside the Robinsons' kitchen door. He pressed a finger to his lips, then reached out to test the handle. Locked. But the gleam in Poirot's eyes suggested he had anticipated this. I watched, my breath held, As he reached into his pocket, retrieving a small tool, his fingers worked deftly, almost casually, and within moments, there was a faint click. The door swung open. Poirot turned to me, his voice barely above a whisper. "And now, Hastings, we step into the unknown. Are you ready?" I swallowed hard, glancing into the darkened flat beyond. Something about it felt off, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting. "Let's find out what makes this place so very cheap," Poirot murmured, stepping inside, and with that we disappeared into the shadows of Montague Mansions. Poirot pulled on the rope with a satisfied nod, and we began our slow descent, the lift creaking softly as it carried us downward through the dimly lit shaft. The confined space smelled of dust and coal, and I found myself gripping the sides uneasily. When we reached the second floor, Poirot let out a quiet exclamation of approval. "Ah, look, Hastings," he whispered, pointing ahead. "The wooden door to the scullery, it is open, just as I suspected." I peered over his shoulder, my heart thudding. The door hung ajar, swaying ever so slightly with the air currents. The dim light cast long shadows across the floor, making the passageway seem more ominous than I would have liked. "You observe?" Poirot continued in a hushed but triumphant voice. "Never do they bolt these doors in the daytime. Anyone could enter or exit, as we have done." I swallowed. "And at night?" "Ah," Poirot said, raising a finger. "That is where the true risk lies. It is against that very possibility that we are going to make provision." Without another word, he slipped a set of delicate tools from his pocket and knelt beside the doorway. I watched as his nimble fingers worked swiftly and methodically, adjusting the mechanism of the bolt. The tiny clicks and scrapes of metal against wood filled the silence. His intent expression showed no doubt, no hesitation. "What exactly are you doing?" I whispered, though I had a sinking suspicion I already knew. Poirot didn't look up, arranging it so that, in the future, the bolt may be pulled back from the lift. A slight chill ran through me, "So that we can enter whenever we please." "But of course," Poirot murmured, his voice calm. "A simple precaution, mon ami. One must always be prepared." In precisely 3 minutes, the work was complete. Poirot returned his tools to his pocket, and with one final glance around, gestured for us to ascend. The coal lift groaned under our weight as we made our way back up to our flat. When we arrived, Poirot dusted off his sleeves and nodded approvingly. "Et voilà," he declared. "We are ready." I didn't share his enthusiasm, but I knew better than to argue. The following day, Monday, Poirot was gone from morning until well into the evening. When he finally returned, he strode in briskly, rubbing his hands together in satisfaction. He dropped into his chair with an air of triumph. "Hastings," he said, a mischievous glint in his eye, "shall I tell you a little history, a story after your own heart? It shall remind you of your favorite cinema, full of intrigue, espionage, and shadowy figures lurking in the dark." I leaned forward, intrigued despite myself. "Go ahead," I said with a chuckle. "I presume this is a true story, not just another one of your elaborate theories." Poirot arched an eyebrow. "It is true, mon ami. In fact, an inspector from Scotland Yard himself has vouched for its accuracy, and it is through his most gracious assistance that I came to learn of it. Listen closely." He paused for dramatic effect, then began. "A little over 6 months ago, a theft occurred, one of great consequence. Some highly classified naval plans were stolen from an American government department. These were no ordinary documents, Hastings. They contained the precise details of some of the most vital harbor defenses, maps, blueprints, vulnerabilities. Imagine what such information would be worth to a foreign power, Japan for instance." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Go on," I urged. Poirot steepled his fingers. Suspicion fell upon a young man, Luigi Voldano, an Italian by birth, working in a minor capacity within the department, but when the papers went missing, so did he. I exhaled slowly. "So he stole the plans and vanished." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice carefully neutral, "or perhaps he was made to vanish." His words sent a chill through me. "Scotland Yard was of course alerted," Poirot continued. "The American authorities were in an uproar. Every effort was made to trace Voldano, but he had disappeared as though into thin air. Not a single lead, not a single clue. And then nothing. Months passed. I frowned. And what does this have to do with our current investigation? Poirot smiled, that knowing, infuriating smile of his. Ah, Hastings. You see, what interests me is this. Voldano is not the only person who has vanished under curious circumstances, and I suspect, mon ami, that the threads of this mystery are more intertwined than you realize. I sat back, trying to process the implications. A stolen government secret, a missing man, and now Montague Mansions. Poirot, I said slowly, are you suggesting that these incidents are connected? He merely raised a finger to his lips. Let us wait and see, Hastings. Let us wait and see. Luigi Voldano was no mere suspect. He was a dead man. His body had been found on the east side of New York, 2 days after his disappearance, a single bullet lodged in his chest. The stolen documents, however, were nowhere to be found. The murder was swift, clean, professional. And that, Hastings, is where the story truly begins. Poirot leaned forward, his sharp eyes gleaming with intrigue as he continued. For months before his death, Voldano had been seen frequently in the company of a certain Miss Elsa Hart, a young, stunningly beautiful concert singer who had recently made her debut in Washington. She was captivating, charming, and utterly unknowable. No records, no past, no verifiable connections. She lived with a supposed brother in a modest apartment, but no one really knew where she came from. I exhaled slowly. And she disappeared, didn't she? Ah, precisely. Poirot tapped a finger against his temple. At the exact moment Voldano was murdered, Miss Elsa Hart vanished as though the earth had swallowed her whole. But mon ami, the American Secret Service suspected they knew the truth about her. They believed her to be far more than a simple performer. No, they believed she was an international spy, one who had operated under numerous aliases, slipping through borders and identities with ease. A woman who was known to have sold secrets before, to the highest bidder. A shiver crept down my spine. So, she took the documents. Poirot raised an eyebrow. That, Hastings, is the question. The Americans believed so, and while they attempted to track her, they also turned their eyes toward another group, certain insignificant Japanese gentlemen residing in Washington. I sat upright. You mean? Poirot nodded. Indeed. These men were watched carefully, but they were careful too, moving like shadows, never leaving a trail. Then 2 weeks ago, one of them vanished, gone without a trace. He resurfaced on a ship bound for England, and that, mon ami, brings us here. A heavy silence filled the room as his words sank in. You're saying Elsa Hart is in England? I asked, my voice low. Poirot smiled, the kind of smile that sent a chill through my bones. The probability is very high. He reached into his pocket and produced a folded paper, smoothing it out on the table. The official description of Elsa Hart, he announced, tapping a finger on the details. Height 5'7", eyes blue, hair auburn, golden under the light, complexion fair, nose straight, no distinguishing marks. I stared at him, unblinking. Poirot, that's Mrs. Robinson. He inclined his head. Ah, you see it too, Hastings. The resemblance is intriguing, is it not? Of course we cannot be certain yet, but one must consider every possibility. And consider this very morning, a strange man, a foreigner, was seen inquiring about the occupants of number 4. Someone else is hunting, Hastings. Someone who does not knock at doors but waits in shadows. I gripped the arm of my chair, a surge of excitement coursing through me. Poirot, what are we going to do? His expression darkened slightly, but there was unmistakable excitement in his voice. We shall prepare. Tonight, mon ami, you shall forego your beauty sleep, and join me in an all-night vigil in the flat below. He reached out and tapped my chest lightly. And bring your revolver, Hastings. We may yet have need of it. My pulse quickened. Bonne idée, I exclaimed. I wouldn't miss this for the world. Poirot chuckled softly. Then let the game begin. The hour of midnight, Poirot murmured, glancing at his pocket watch, is both solemn and suitable. A time when the world is quiet, when shadows lengthen, and when those who work in darkness make their move. I nodded, gripping my revolver. There was an eerie stillness in the flat, as we crept cautiously into the coal lift, lowering ourselves to the second floor. The old contraption creaked under our weight, but Poirot, ever composed, simply pressed a finger to his lips. I held my breath. With practiced ease, he manipulated the wooden door leading into the scullery. It swung inward without a sound, revealing the unlit, empty kitchen beyond. The air inside was thick with dust, the scent of old wood and something faintly metallic. Silently, we moved through the kitchen, positioning ourselves near the slightly ajar door that led into the hall. "Now, mon ami," Poirot whispered, settling into a chair with deliberate ease. "We wait." The minutes stretched endlessly, the silence pressing in on me. I strained to hear the faintest sound, my heart beat loud in my ears. The darkness played tricks on my eyes, shapes shifting in the shadows, movement where there was none. Fatigue tugged at my senses, the steady monotony lulling me into a haze. Then, just as my mind teetered between wakefulness and sleep, a noise, a faint, deliberate scratching against the front door. I stiffened. Poirot's hand brushed against mine, a silent command for readiness. I swallowed, willing my muscles to stay taut, my senses alert. We moved as one, careful, calculated. Nearing the hall, I could hear it more clearly now, a subtle, practiced motion, metal scraping against metal. A shiver ran down my spine. Whoever was out there wasn't fumbling. This was the work of an expert. Poirot leaned in, his lips at my ear. "They are cutting the lock." Silent, precise, professionals. I clenched my jaw, gripping my revolver tighter. "When I give the word," Poirot continued, voice barely a breath, "not a second before, you strike, hard, hold him fast. Be cautious, mon ami, he will have a knife." The lock gave a final click, a tiny circular glow of light appeared in the door, just for a second, then vanished. A moment later, the handle turned with unbearable slowness. The door eased open. Poirot and I pressed ourselves against the wall, our breaths controlled, our movements calculated. A figure slipped inside, moving like liquid shadow, stepping cautiously into the darkened flat. The trap was set, and in mere seconds, the night would erupt into chaos. The man's breathing was steady but deliberate, the kind of breath drawn by someone who was both cautious and determined. His silhouette moved past us in the dim light, a predator slipping through the darkness, completely unaware that he was stepping straight into a trap. Then, click, the sudden flare of a flashlight cut through the blackness. It illuminated only a fraction of the room, but that was all we needed. Poirot hissed in my ear, sharp and urgent. Now we struck like lightning. Poirot moved with astonishing speed, looping a woolen scarf over the man's head, muffling any sound before he could so much as gasp. I lunged, seizing his arms in a vice-like grip, twisting them behind his back as he thrashed against me. His strength was surprising, sinewy, desperate, but we had the advantage. His struggle was brief. With a sharp yank, I wrenched a gleaming dagger from his grasp and sent it clattering to the floor. Poirot, methodical as ever, tightened the scarf, ensuring it covered not only the man's eyes but also his mouth, silencing him entirely. With a practiced calm, he leaned in close, whispering something in the captive's ear, low, rapid, precise. A moment passed, then another. The man's chest rose and fell, his breath ragged. Finally he gave the slightest nod of understanding, a silent surrender. Poirot pulled away, satisfied. With a mere flick of his fingers, he motioned for me to follow. We moved swiftly, ushering our captive down the narrow staircase, our steps ghostly quiet against the wooden floorboards. Outside, the night air was crisp, carrying the distant hum of the city. Poirot turned to me as we reached the pavement. "A taxi awaits us around the corner," he murmured. "Fetch it, mon ami." I hesitated, my grip still firm on the revolver. "And if he tries to run?" Poirot smiled, that small knowing smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "He will not," he said simply. I studied the man, searching his hidden face for any sign of defiance, but he remained still. Unnaturally so. Something told me Poirot had said more in those whispered words than I could possibly imagine. Nodding, I took off towards the waiting taxi. The engine rumbled low as I climbed in, instructing the driver to pull closer. When I returned, the captive's face had been uncovered, and as I caught a proper look at him, my breath hitched. "Good Lord," I whispered sharply to Poirot. "He's not." Poirot gave me an amused glance, his voice dripping with playful sarcasm. "Ah, Hastings, your powers of observation never cease to astound me." No, the man is not English. I swallowed hard, studying our captive. His sharp features, olive complexion, and dark, intelligent eyes confirmed it. "He's Italian," I murmured, the weight of the revelation sinking in. We stepped into the taxi, Poirot smoothly giving the driver an address in St. John's Wood. The vehicle rumbled forward, slicing through the silent streets of London. I leaned back, my mind reeling. What had Poirot whispered to him? Where were we going? And more importantly, who exactly had we just captured? The night was far from over. I held my breath as we stepped out of the taxi. The house before us stood in eerie silence, its darkened windows offering no hint of what lay within. It was small, set slightly back from the road, almost as if it were trying to hide itself. A solitary street lamp flickered weakly, casting long wavering shadows across the pavement. A man slightly drunk and swaying with unsteady steps nearly collided with Poirot. The detective muttered something sharp and swift under his breath, too low for me to catch, but whatever it was, the drunkard straightened slightly, gave a jerky nod, and stumbled off into the night. Poirot rang the doorbell once, twice, no answer. Frowning, he lifted the heavy brass knocker and pounded it against the wooden door, the sharp sound echoing in the empty street. I saw the silhouette of our captive shift uneasily beside me, but he remained silent. Then suddenly light flared behind the fanlight above the door, a shadow moved. The door cracked open just enough to reveal a sliver of darkness within. "What the devil do you want?" The voice was rough, edged with irritation. Poirot adopted an air of urgency, his entire demeanor shifting in an instant. His voice, high-pitched and frantic, rang out, thick with an exaggerated French accent. "I must see the doctor. My wife, she is taken very ill." The man on the other side of the door hesitated, then scoffed. "There's no doctor here, you've got the wrong house." He moved to shut the door, but Poirot was faster. With the nimbleness of a cat, he wedged his foot into the gap, stopping it from closing. His expression twisted into one of sheer outrage, his hands gesticulating wildly as he launched into a tirade. "What is this nonsense? No doctor? Are you mad? I will not move from this step until you help me. I will ring and knock all night. The law will hear of this, monsieur. The law." The man hesitated again, his grip on the door tightening. His face, partially visible in the dim light, was lined with annoyance, but also something else, a flicker of unease. His eyes darted past us, scanning the deserted street, as if checking for unseen eyes. "Cher," he said through gritted teeth, "I suggest you leave before you make a mistake." Poirot, undeterred, took a dramatic step backward, preparing to descend the stairs. "Very well," he declared loudly. "If you will not help, I shall call the police. They will not take kindly to this refusal, I assure you." The man stiffened, his face drained of color. "No, don't do that. For heaven's sake." He cut himself off abruptly, glancing around once more, then exhaled sharply. "Fine, come in, but be quick about it." Poirot cast me a glance that spoke volumes. We had him. With a final triumphant flick of his coat, Poirot stepped inside. I followed, our captive in tow, as the door shut behind us with a quiet, ominous click. Whatever secrets this house held, we were about to uncover them. The man lunged after Poirot, but with a swift, calculated motion, the detective sidestepped and gave him a precise shove. The man staggered backward, arms flailing, before crashing down the steps with a strangled curse. Before he could recover, we were inside. Poirot slammed the door shut, bolted it, and spun on his heel. "Quick, in here," he commanded. Without hesitation we followed him into the nearest room. Poirot flicked on the light, revealing a lavishly decorated space, rich dark wood paneling, velvet drapes, and a low-burning fireplace that cast flickering shadows across the walls. The air smelled faintly of cigar smoke and expensive perfume. Poirot turned to our captive, his expression sharp. "Behind the curtain, now." "She, senor," the Italian whispered, vanishing behind the thick folds of rose-colored velvet that framed the window. He moved like a shadow, soundless and swift. We barely had a moment to steady ourselves before the door burst open. A woman stormed in, her presence commanding. She was tall, strikingly beautiful, with waves of red gold hair tumbling over her shoulders. A scarlet silk kimono was hastily wrapped around her, cinched at the waist, but her eyes, wide and dark with alarm, betrayed her fear. "Where is my husband?" she demanded, her voice sharp with panic. Her gaze darted between us, her breathing unsteady. "Who are you?" Poirot took a step forward, offering a courteous bow, his face a picture of calm. "Ah, madame, your concern is touching. It is to be hoped that your husband does not catch a chill, though I did observe he was properly dressed for the evening air. His slippers were quite substantial, and his dressing gown rather warm. A wise precaution, no." The woman stiffened, clutching her kimono tighter, her knuckles turned white against the fabric. "I demand to know what you're doing in my house." Poirot sighed, tilting his head as if in regret. "Ah yes, it is true that none of us have had the pleasure of your acquaintance, madame. A terrible oversight, to be sure, particularly unfortunate, considering one of our number has traveled a great distance, indeed all the way from New York, just for this moment. Imagine their disappointment were we to waste such an opportunity." The color drained from the woman's face, her lips parted slightly, as if she had been about to speak, but no words came. Instead she took a slow step backward, her gaze flickering toward the heavy drapes by the window. Poirot's eyes gleamed. He had her, and in that moment, I knew we were no longer the hunters. We had just stepped into a trap. The curtains parted, and to my horror, the Italian stepped forward, my revolver gripped firmly in his hand. A cold dread settled over me as I realized what had happened. Poirot must have placed it down in the cab, perhaps distracted for just a moment, and now, the man who should have been our prisoner, held all the power. The woman let out a shrill, piercing scream, her face twisting in terror. She turned to flee, her kimono billowing behind her, but Poirot was already at the door. He did not move, only inclined his head slightly, watching her with his usual unreadable expression. "Let me pass," she shrieked. "He'll kill me." The Italian laughed, a low menacing sound that made my skin crawl. He leveled the revolver, swinging it between each of us, his grip steady. "Who was it that sent Luigi Voldano to his grave?" he demanded, his dark eyes gleaming. The weight of his rage filled the air like a storm about to break. We dared not move. I could hear my own heartbeat, thudding in my ears. "My God, Poirot, this is madness," I whispered urgently. "What do we do?" Poirot did not so much as blink. His voice was maddeningly calm. "Hastings, my friend, you will oblige me by speaking a little less. I assure you our companion will not shoot until I allow him to." The Italian sneered. "You're so sure of that, eh?" I wasn't, but Poirot, he looked as if he were merely solving a chess puzzle, not standing at gunpoint. The woman suddenly turned to Poirot, her eyes sharp, calculating. "What is it you want?" Poirot smiled politely, as if they were discussing an evening invitation. "Ah, madame, I do not think it necessary to insult the intelligence of Miss Elsa Hart by explaining." For a brief second, something passed between them, an understanding, a realization. Then, with astonishing speed, she lunged for a large black velvet cat that sat atop the telephone table, a seemingly innocent decoration. I barely had time to react before she tore it open, ripping the fabric apart with a violent pull. A soft rustling filled the room, something hidden in the lining. Poirot gave an appreciative nod. "Ah, very clever." The woman wasted no time. She spun toward the door, her fingers clutching whatever secret she had just retrieved. Poirot stepped aside, his hand gesturing elegantly. "Bon voyage, madame. I shall, however, detain our friend from New York while you make your exit." "You fool," roared the Italian. He raised the revolver, his face twisted with fury, his finger tightening on the trigger. He fired. The shot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. But there was no impact, no blood, no scream. The woman had already disappeared through the door, untouched. The Italian's face contorted in confusion. He pulled the trigger again. Click. Nothing. I seized the opportunity, throwing my full weight at him. knocking the revolver from his grasp as we crashed against a table. Papers and glass shattered around us. Poirot, ever the picture of composure, gave a small sigh. Hastings, mon ami, must I always remind you, I do not care for my friends to carry loaded firearms, and certainly, I would never permit a mere acquaintance to do so. The Italian cursed wildly, but Poirot only shook his head with a mild expression of disappointment. See now what I have done for you, Poirot murmured, adjusting his cuffs, as if we had simply finished afternoon tea rather than a near murderous encounter, and in that moment, I realized he had been in control from the very beginning. Poirot dusted off his sleeve, his expression one of mild amusement, as he watched the Italian slump into the chair, defeated. I have saved you from the gallows, mon ami, he said smoothly, his voice carrying the faintest note of mockery. And as for our beautiful lady, do not trouble yourself. She will not get far. The Italian's head snapped up, his eyes filled with sudden alarm. You lie, he spat. Poirot chuckled, shaking his head as he walked leisurely to the window and parted the curtain. The dim glow of streetlights barely pierced the night, but in the shadows figures moved, silent, watchful, waiting. No, no, my friend, I do not lie. The house is watched, front and back. The moment she steps beyond that door, she will walk straight into the waiting arms of the police. A poetic fate, is it not? To run so hard, only to be caught just before the finish line. The Italian let out a guttural curse and lunged toward the door, but Poirot's hand shot up in warning. Be careful, very careful, he murmured, his gaze like steel. For a moment the man hesitated, his shoulders heaving with barely contained rage. Then, without another word, he stormed out of the room. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I turned to Poirot, shaking my head in disbelief. You knew, I said, my voice low. From the very beginning, you knew all of this. Poirot smiled, his fingers lightly adjusting the perfect fold of his pocket square. But of course, Hastings, it was all so very simple. I let out a frustrated breath. Simple? Poirot, we've been chasing shadows through half of London. How can you say it was simple? He sighed, as if my lack of understanding personally wounded him. Mon cher, let us return to the beginning. Consider this: out of hundreds, perhaps thousands of applicants for number 4, Montague Mansions, only the Robinsons were chosen. Why? I frowned, trying to piece it together. Their appearance perhaps, but they weren't particularly unusual. You are thinking, Hastings, that is good, but no, it was not their looks. Poirot tapped a finger against his temple. Then what remains? Their name. I guessed, though it seemed absurd. Exactement. Poirot clapped his hands together triumphantly. That, Hastings, was the brilliance of it, the beauty of its deception. I stared at him. But Robinson is an incredibly common name. There must be thousands of them in London alone. Precisement, mon ami. And that was the whole point. Poirot leaned in, his eyes gleaming. Elsa Hart and her accomplice, whether he be husband, brother, or something else entirely, came from New York. They settled into Montague Mansions, under the name of Mr. and Mrs. Robinson, thinking themselves safe. But then, his voice dropped to a near whisper, his fingers making a delicate wave in the air. They discovered that someone was hunting them, someone dangerous. One of the secret societies, perhaps the Mafia, or the Camorra, to which our dear departed Luigi Voldano belonged, had found their trail. What could they do? They had to disappear, but not entirely. They needed to leave the flat, yet ensure their pursuers wasted time searching for ghosts. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. So they put the flat up for rent, I said slowly, at such a ridiculously low price that it would attract dozens of potential tenants, and all they had to do was wait until another Robinson applied, someone with the same last name, to take their place. Poirot beamed. Bravo, Hastings, that is precisely what they did. Their enemies, not knowing their faces, only their name, would continue to watch the flat, never realizing that the Robinsons they were following were not the Robinsons they sought. I let out a long breath, shaking my head. It was so simple, I admitted. Poirot raised a finger. Simple, yes, but only if one takes the time to see it. And now, mon ami, let us go. The game is over, and the pieces are falling exactly where they should." He gestured toward the door, ever the conductor of an invisible orchestra, as the sound of police sirens finally filled the night. Poirot smoothed his mustache, eyes twinkling with the satisfaction of a case unfolding exactly as he had predicted. "Hastings, mon ami, do you see now the brilliance of their plan?" he said, his voice rich with amusement. I was still reeling. So they deliberately picked a common name, ensuring someone completely innocent would take their place. Mais oui. If you open a telephone directory, you will find the name Robinson scattered through its pages like autumn leaves in the wind. A fair-haired Mrs. Robinson was bound to appear eventually, and when she did, voila, the avenger arrives, knowing only the name and address, not the face of his quarry. He strikes, the deed is done, and meanwhile, Elsa Hart slips away, unseen, untouched, once again escaping death by the narrowest margin. A chill ran through me as I imagined the ruthless precision of it all. But the real Mrs. Robinson, what will she think when she finds her flat ransacked? Poirot chuckled. "Ah, mon cher Hastings, that delightful lady, so innocent, so truthful, you must introduce me to her properly, but for now we must hurry back. Ah, listen, that sounds like our friends from Scotland Yard arriving." A loud rapid pounding rattled the door. "But wait," I said, frowning. "How did you even know this address?" Poirot shot me a look of pure exasperation. "Hastings, you wound me. Of course I had the first Mrs. Robinson followed when she left the other flat. Finally you were beginning to use those little grey cells of yours." Without another word, he slid the bolt aside, then with a mischievous glint in his eyes, cracked the door open just enough to poke his head through. What happened next left me utterly speechless. He let out a sharp, piercing meow. A startled yelp came from the other side. The Scotland Yard inspector, who had been standing stiffly alongside an unfamiliar man, jumped back in sheer surprise. "Good heavens, Poirot, what's the meaning of this?" he barked, his composure quickly returning. Poirot pushed the door fully open, grinning. "Ah, just a little joke, my friend. A moment of levity, but do come in after all. I imagine you are here to search the premises, n'est-ce pas?" The inspector scowled, but stepped inside, nodding to his companion. "We've got them," the other man, a hard-faced American with sharp eyes, said, "but they didn't have the package on them." Poirot clicked his tongue, shaking his head. "No, of course not. They are clever, but you see, my dear friends, you were looking in the wrong place all along." The inspector narrowed his eyes. "And where should we be looking?" Poirot, ever the dramatist, held up an object, a black velvet cat, its soft exterior appearing entirely ordinary. "This," he declared, "is the key to your mystery." For a moment there was silence, then the American burst out, "For the love of Poirot, are you playing games? We don't have time for this." Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, mon ami." The Egyptians revered the cat. Even today, it is said to bring good luck. But what is more fascinating, what truly makes it remarkable, is what lies within. With a single deft movement, Poirot sliced open the base of the velvet cat. A soft rustle, then like petals unfolding from a hidden flower, delicate sheets of thin paper slipped from the lining. The American's face changed instantly. "Well, I'll be," he breathed, seizing the papers. His trained fingers felt over them carefully, eyes scanning. Then with a low whistle, he turned to Poirot and thrust out his hand. "Mr. Poirot, I got to admit, I underestimated you. Pleased to make your acquaintance. The United States Secret Service owes you one." Poirot, beaming, shook his hand. "Ah, mon ami, it was simply a matter of logic, and of course a little bit of theatrical flair." As the last echoes of the case settled, I turned to my friend, shaking my head in admiration and exasperation. "You do enjoy showing off, don't you, Poirot?" he smirked. "But of course, Hastings, where would the fun be otherwise?" And with that, he tipped his hat, straightened his tie, and led the way into the night, his little grey cells victorious once again. Thank you very much for listening to this story narrated by Dr. Rami. Don't forget to subscribe to the Curious Case channel, and be sure to leave a comment.